we're going to go ahead and get started today. Call this meeting to order at 7 p.m. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. Roll call.
Vice Chair Biani,
Here.
Chair Tombe,
Present.
Commissioner Stanek,
Here.
and it looks like Commissioner Wilson and Commissioner Davis are absent for now.
Do you know if they're coming late?
I believe Commissioner Davis said she might be
delayed.
coming late. Yes, I haven't heard about Commissioner Wilson.
Excellent. If anybody in the audience would like to speak to something not on the agenda item, you can fill out a blue card in the front on the right-hand side. If you want to talk about an agenda item, you can also fill out a blue card in the front on the right. We really like to hear from everyone, so even if it's just to say hi. All right, written communications. Oh, oops. Yes, I did. Approval of minutes. I just got so excited to hear from the community. Oh, okay, cool. Great. Never mind, moving on. There are no postponements. Any oral communications? No? Okay. Written communications, we have this one response from the systems master plan, which will be entered into the records.
There's a second one. There's a second communication underneath that.
I only...
Yes, that's also part of written communications as well.
Oh, this one as well?
Yes.
Oh, okay, perfect. Sorry. I thought this was for the other agenda item. Excellent. Both will be entered into the record once we are done with the meeting. Excellent. Now, moving on to agenda item number 1, which is hefty and exciting because it's so much of what we have been working towards. It's our citywide parks and recreation system master plan, and this is a draft of that master plan. Go ahead.
Okay. Good evening, Chair and members of the Commission. Jeff Melkus, Director, Recreation Community Services. Just to start us out, this is the public draft of the master plan. It's a culmination of several years of work and a lot of hard work and effort on your part as well as staff members and thousands of community members that provided time, energy, and input into the plan. The plan will be presented tonight in terms of really kind of how we got to where we're going and where we're heading next with it. We have a set of unique challenges along the way. One of the challenges between now and 2040 is that our land that we have in order to meet our community's needs is at a very high premium and will need to be competed with, in a sense, with other important needs such as housing. We have another challenge within our community, and that is, as you'll hear more about, is the concept of equity and easy access without barriers to the facilities in the parks. And we've done what we can so far to kind of illuminate or illustrate what challenges there are in terms of how much property or how much park space and facilities do we have that are, say, in the east part of the city versus the west. In order to maintain a standard at a time when population is set to change is going to really be a challenge for us. So we've evaluated our general plan with the city. We've looked to see, you know, what our needs are, what our previous planning efforts were, and the conclusion at the end of the day is a whole lot of opportunities and a whole lot of excitement. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to the folks who worked really hard to make this plan happen.
Thank you so much. I'm Cindy Mendoza. I'm with MIG. I'm Director of Parks and Recreation, and I'm privileged to be back here tonight to present to you the high-level overview of the draft master plan. I'm indicating that it's a high-level overview because you guys have been instrumentally involved in creating this plan already. You are familiar with many of the elements of it, but we would like to highlight it here tonight for the benefit of everyone as we get your final comments and revisions. So the purpose tonight is to, after this level overview that we're providing of the plan, to also give you an update quickly on some of the comments that we've heard from the public so far as we are requesting feedback on the draft master plan, and then to take your guidance and input as well. As you know, this is a long-range plan to carry the Department of Community Services and Recreation through the year 2040. As a long-range plan, it does provide higher-level guidance, as the director has indicated, to really set forth the policies and understand the community needs necessary to guide improvements and enhancements to parks and recreation services in the long term. While many residents like to think of this plan as really a series of small site master plans for every single one of their individual parks, the plan really isn't intended to do that. Instead of dictating what improvements are needed on a site-by-site basis, instead it captures the community's vision, translates that into an understanding of the types of improvements and enhancements that are needed, and then also provides direction for the vision of a park and the level of improvements that park may need in the future. As you all know, this was a multi-phase planning process carried over several years that gave us time to conduct the right technical analysis as well as robust community outreach to ensure that the data is accurate. The findings are all summarized in 5 chapters, as well as a series of 7 appendices that provide a lot of insight, guidance, and added detail and data to understand park and recreation needs. As you all know, the Park and Recreation system here is comprised of over 223 acres of parks, trails, creek corridors, sports fields, and recreation facilities. And that these recreation facilities tend to be very traditional, leaving opportunities to provide a variety of different types of recreation moving forward into the future. Cupertino is a unique community, so we've really worked hard to understand community needs, reflecting the fact that we're looking at a variety of ages, interests, different demographic and cultural groups, people with different and high expectations for parks and recreation moving forward because of the role it plays in supporting community livability, a high quality of life, and even the economic vitality and environmental security of this community. Community representation was important, and again, we appreciate the role that you all played in providing advice and guidance through this process. As you know, we also had several check-ins with city council members as well, and a project advisory group and project management team that ensured that this plan represented community needs. We also conducted a robust community outreach process that involved more than 2,000 participants prior to the feedback that we are now receiving on the draft master plan. All the outreach activities ranged from in-person meetings to online opportunities, pop-up events, different focus groups to ensure that a variety of stakeholders and residents were involved. There was also specific outreach to some underrepresented groups and key groups such as youth in the community to make sure their voices were heard. As we've discussed previously, there are 12 outreach themes that emerged from this planning process. Those outreach themes and the comments that we heard guided the development of a brand new master plan vision as well as a mission for the department. Again, you all have had feedback and guidance on the wording that we used here to update those elements. This also translated into the development of 7 master plan goals. These goals are numbered, but they're not in priority order of any type. However, they do reflect the different types of initiatives that need to be addressed to achieve the community's vision for the future. That includes focusing on conservation and the protection of nature, connectivity through trail development, as the director has mentioned, also looking at the equitable access to parks and recreation, and in particular, service gaps and needs of the community moving forward. Opportunities to enhance or improve existing sites, resources, and facilities. Also, the desire to activate parks through programs, through activities, whether they're drop-in or organized, and through the community events such as those held at Memorial Park that are such a way for this community to celebrate together. We also address the quality of services desired. That ranges from everything from customer service to the quality of the design of your parks and facilities. And finally, we looked at needs to ensure that we can sustain the park and recreation system through good management, maintenance, best practices, and resource stewardship moving forward. These goals provided the direction for the creation of some system-wide objectives and action statements that are in Chapter 3 of this plan. As you know, there is a lot of detail here that it provides higher level policy directions. These really are policy recommendations on how to move forward in enhancing park and recreation services to achieve your goals and your vision for the future. Because you are familiar with these, I'm not going to go through all of these tonight. Suffice to say that there's a level of detail and guidance here that, as we heard from comments from the public, is very thorough, is very robust, and clearly was well thought through to come to the policy directions that are in this plan. So those include ones for nature, addressing trails, again, changing the policies to ensure equitable access and the provision of close-to-home neighborhood parks, addressing ways to enhance parks by providing different types of facilities moving forward. Again, engaging the public through activation at different parks, including neighborhood-focused events and activities, as well as enhancements to programs. Addressing the quality of the park and recreation system through things such as improved hospitality and communication, as well as data tracking and monitoring of performance. And again, focusing on the financial sustainability, the sustainable choices, the management and stewardship, and wise use of resources needed as you move forward into the future. Those goals, objectives, and actions provide the context for the site-specific recommendations that are in the plan. All recommendations for every single existing site are summarized in Appendix E of the plan that really presents recommendations in 3 separate ways. It starts with the existing system, how to maintain and take care of your existing park sites and enhance them moving forward into the future. Then it presents recommendations for major new parks and facilities. As you all know, we call those the big moves because they require a large investment of capital and operations resources, as well as land in many cases and staffing to move them forward. And finally, there were recommendations associated with a variety of other types of smaller facilities that we heard a strong interest for in this community and would like to see built into new site master plans as well as park development going forward. Those range from a variety of things such as universal play that we heard a strong emphasis to some active recreation facilities and opportunities. So tonight we're just going to highlight a couple of the key ones that have come forward without going into the details, which you are welcome to ask more questions about any of these or others that I'm not even going to describe. But obviously Memorial Park being a key site for this community is one that we will look forward for immediate enhancement, both repurposing the inactive pond as well as upgrading this as a key event site. And then also finishing the Stevens Creek Corridor master plan to ensure that site protects the natural resources that are there and supports the recreation opportunities desired. Looking at a couple of your large neighborhood parks, Creekside, retaining that, the vision that we have for that site as a sports hub that also supports neighborhood recreation. and at Jollyman, enhancing that park as a community hub, adding additional programs and activities, as well as being able to continue to participate in sports. Trail recommendations were key in this, as we talked at length about how we improve non-motorized transportation in the community, as well as access to parks. I know that is a key interest of yours. Certainly carrying forward recommendations in conjunction with the Public Works Department, and also reflecting the fact that there is a very strong pedestrian plan, as well as a bicycle plan and a regional trails plan, and finding the commonalities between those and the priorities for parks and access to parks will be important in the future. Also looking at schools and building on the relationship that we've established through this planning process with representatives of the 2 different school districts who are on our advisory committee, understanding how we can coordinate and partner with the schools better to help meet needs, and also enhance the sites that we already have joint use agreements for in the future. Looking forward, there's an opportunity to consider new acquisitions. As you know, land costs are high, as the director has mentioned, and acquisition will be difficult and based on existing opportunities that may come available as we move forward in the future. The department will continue to look for all available opportunities to meet park needs in specifically underserved areas, particularly North and East Cupertino, to address those needs. And again, coordinate through trail development to also open access to underserved areas and enhance travel across the community. The master plan also looks at opportunities to develop several major new facilities. We know this will require a great investment, and for several of these facilities, further market analysis and financial feasibility study and business planning is needed to better understand the full ramifications of the business and operations costs associated with these facilities, the traffic impacts that they may occur, but as well as the needs specifically for different types of elements associated with these. So for example, for aquatics, looking at needs for recreational swim, aquatic exercise, lap swimming, pool events, and doing so for each of the different types of facilities to understand what are the elements needed and what are the revenue generating and cost recovery capacity of each of those. This also includes expanding senior services, whether at the existing senior center or also in different locations across the community, and thinking differently about the needs for teen space to look at the existing teen center, but improve and really empower teens through identifying space and/or partnerships with others to address teen needs. As I mentioned, there are several recommendations for other types of facilities. These range from different types of play to different types of unique recreation features such as neighborhood event space, focusing on sports, but also looking at opportunities to integrate nature into not only the community, but also the park system, looking at the potential to enhance pollinator corridors, but also maybe to reduce turf in some key areas of the parks that are not used for recreation to provide more natural and native plantings. Those are the highlights that were presented in Chapter 4. So moving into Chapter 5, the plan shifts gears and really starts to talk about how we want to implement all of these different recommendations going forward. The plan summarizes what we call early action initiatives, which are those items that the department is already moving forward on or will be moving on shortly in the future. It also identifies the short-term actions for these recreation elements that we described. As you realize from reading the plan and the appendices, it identifies short and long-term recommendations for all the major facilities as well as these smaller facilities. And so in the implementation chapter, it identifies how some of these can be implemented using pilot programs to test their success in different parts of the community. And of course, for the major projects, it describes a plan forward for moving each of these forward in terms of the concept, but as well as looking at potential partners to meet many of these needs first before moving forward in the conversation to discuss how to develop your own facility. As noted in the plan, the costs for many of these major projects are substantial, especially where land acquisition needs must be addressed. The plan notes general planning level costs for each of the major facilities to give a sense of the capital investment needed if all of these moved forward through the year 2040. It also identifies that operations costs will need to be addressed not only for the major new facilities, but also for every new addition and enhancement to the park and recreation system to ensure the city has the funds needed to be able to take care of and steward their parks and facilities. This includes additional funds needed for park maintenance, as well as funds needed to support programs and activities at these sites. Finally, the plan ends with guidance on how to fund this vision for a robust and dynamic park and recreation system going forward. It includes maximizing the funding sources that you already have, as well as investigating several new ones. And as this table indicates, recognizing that there are different types of funding sources that support capital projects, as well as the operations, maintenance, and programming needed. So finally, the plan provides guidance on how to prioritize these projects going forward into the future so that you can sequence them in the annual capital improvement planning processes that the city goes through every year as part of its budgeting cycle. So with a quick overview of the plan, we also wanted to present very quickly some of the feedback that we heard from the community on the draft plan. I'm going to turn it over to Gail to be able to provide that information to you.
Thank you, Cindy. I'm Gail Seeds, Park Improvement Manager. Thank you, Commission, for sharing your time with us this evening. This slide presents a snapshot of what has been done this month to get the word out about the availability of this draft master plan for public input. We've worked with our public information office and their staff to strive to let everyone know that we have a draft plan and we're seeking feedback. We've used social media sites. I know we reached over 10,000 people on Facebook promotions. We've emailed to a variety of users, folks that use our recreation system, block leaders, our own master plan mailing list, CERTS folks, and we've used website availability. We've been running banners and updating the project webpage. We're in various calendars. And you've probably seen we've got lawn signs up at each of our recreation facilities and each of our park sites. And we've been running images on the video screens at our recreation facilities. So we've been working to get the word out. Last Thursday evening, we presented this plan to our Bicycle Pedestrian Commission, and the general feedback was that they were enthusiastic that there was the amount of focus on trails, on connectivity, on bicycle and pedestrian connections. So they were pleased. They made 3 particular comments that they wished to forward. They were included in your packet, and these 3 bullets summarize their comments. There was additional discussion about the importance of safety and some general discussion, but in particular, they were focused on the importance of implementing the loop trail. That's a big priority for them, and connectivity from particular sites to existing and proposed trails. On Tuesday evening this week, the Teen Commission and the Youth Advisory Board co-sponsored with us a youth and teen forum about this master plan. We had over 50 young people attend. That doesn't count the parents and the adults that were present. And they were a wonderful audience. They were very attentive, and we received 54 comment cards that were provided in your packet. And if you've had time to go over them, it's very impressive the kinds of comments that our young people have, their thinking, the breadth of their thinking, how insightful they are. very impressive. I hope everyone in this community takes a look at what we heard from them. I summarized a couple of things that came up from multiple young people. And let me see, these slides are in reverse order. We heard from them verbally and on their written comments that they were very pleased that youth and teen empowerment is one of the 12 themes that arose from this process, and they appreciated the opportunity to participate actively in this planning. We heard from quite a few of them how important trail and non-motorized connectivity is to them. They are very active cyclists and walkers, so they valued that aspect. Also, our young people are highly focused on natural resources, integrating nature into our park system, being good environmental stewards, and conservation. That conservation goal resonated with many of the young folks we heard from. We heard diverse feedback about the teen center and teen services, quite a range of opinions. Some of them were interested in having a different teen venue, cafe style, study space, and loud space and meeting space. Some of them felt that a teen center really isn't needed. There were different kinds of suggestions about what types of teen services to offer. We found those valuable. There was very consistent feedback about serving the diversity of our community. Very impressive, the number of teen and young person comment cards saying, make sure you provide enough services for seniors. There's a lot of seniors in our community. So the fact that these middle school students and high school students are thinking about all of us, and they talked about inclusive opportunities and about embracing various cultures, and that was a theme in their comment cards. Yep. A couple more things that kind of cropped up in lots of places were that they support equity in parkland distribution. Quite a few talked about the geographic inequities in town and that would be important to address. They also were enthusiastic about stronger collaboration with the schools. They see that as a great opportunity for us. There was consistent feedback about aquatics, pools, and water play, and/or gym space, and/or fine art space. Quite a few of them commented on those as good goals. And there were a number of very specific comments about two activities in particular, about basketball and about badminton, and the enthusiasm they have for those activities and the need for places to do that. Lastly, they are financially savvy, and they want us to be mindful about those big investments, about biting on anything expensive, any of those big, costly facilities. We heard be smart, don't just raise taxes, be careful about how we're spending our public dollars and think it through. But there's tons of great suggestions in those comment cards. These are just a few that arose. We had a public workshop at the Senior Center yesterday evening, and the attendance was light, but the enthusiasm was high, and there was very spirited verbal feedback, lots of questions, lots of high interest, and this page summarizes some of what we heard verbally. We only got one written comment card, and that is included as a desk item to you tonight. The other folks were satisfied with discussing with the team what was on their mind. And once again, we heard clearly that parks and having park land is a key priority, that amongst the people present, they emphasize that, and that the equity of park distribution is also very important, and being able to walk to a park, that is a driver for them, and that kind of supersedes other things that they said, if we still need park space, why should we be even thinking about building, for example, a performing arts center? Park space is a top goal. There also, we heard kind of mixed feedback about swimming. There was uncertainty about, do we need any more swimming pools in this town? Do they really get that well used? On the other hand, another attendee said, well, it's very important to learn to swim, that's safety. It's a key thing for this community to provide. There was some talk about basketball and the idea of perhaps partnering with the school since they already have basketball courts. They commented that basketball is pretty loud and building it right next to someone's backyard, adding a noise impact, we need to be mindful of those sorts of things, even if we're looking to add basketball options. And a last couple of comments were that if we pursue any of those big facilities, that really identifying operations and maintenance costs would be very important, and getting a clear idea of what kind of facility we'd operate, what its cost recovery would be, what it would cost to operate. That's essential to understand. And there was talk, again, there was more talk about the schools and about exploring the opportunity for expanded or further joint use agreements. There were a number of other comments about other things, what is going on at certain sites, and those comments will be summarized and provided as part of the record of this process. But that's a snapshot of some of the things we heard at the public workshop. That completes what we are here to present to you tonight, and we are looking forward to clarifying questions, other questions and comments. Here's some ideas for things that could help us moving forward. In particular, if there are things that the public would like us to change or add to the plan. And as commissioners, any changes or additions that you see that are warranted, and any feedback that you wish to be brought forward to the City Council, that would help us to hear.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, both of you. I know that this has been an incredibly long, incredibly challenging, but very rewarding process. And so it's amazing to actually see it in one very large large report. Before we go into clarifying questions, for folks in the audience, we would absolutely love to hear your thoughts and feedback on anything that you liked or you didn't like in the master plan if you had a chance to read it. If not, and you just want to be able to say, hey, this is one thing that I really want to make sure is included in the master plan, please, 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 we love to hear from you all. There are blue cards up at the front. It's going to be your only opportunity to respond to the agenda item that we're discussing today. So please do fill out a blue card up here, and we'll definitely be listening to your comments. With that, if the commissioners have any clarifying questions that they would like to ask.
We've been through this in excruciating detail, yes. So I think we've asked a lot of questions along the way, and so I think we've gotten a lot of answers. I guess it would be nice to hear what the next steps will be after tonight. If you could lay those out for us, so if we have an idea, if there's anything else we want to add to that.
Yes, Commissioner Stanek, we will take your input and all input collected to date to the City Council to a study session on February 5th. That is a Tuesday. And seek the Council's guidance and feedback. And thereafter, we are have a slot on an agenda at the following Planning Commission meeting. The Planning Commission may have new commissioners seated, and we will share this plan with them. And with all of the collected input, we'll go to our consultant team so that this draft plan can be refined into a document that reflects and responds to the guidance we receive. And that document will be brought back through a public process together with the associated environmental clearance documents. And that will take place primarily in April, and we are, depending on the volume of changes and what we hear from the council, if they are looking for something significant to be added or changed, the document with the environmental clearance input will come together to council potentially in May, maybe in the June timeframe, depending on, as I said, what we hear and the amount of effort it takes to respond appropriately. So that's what's coming up next.
Great, thank you. Other clarifying questions? Excellent. So again, to folks in the audience, if you have any input on the master plan, we would absolutely love to hear that. Anything from please add more trails, please add, cricket fields, badminton courts, make sure there's lights on the trails, whatever it is that you want or anything you don't want, would love to hear from you. The blue cards are up at the front over here, so please do fill that out. We do have a couple of cards, which I'm super excited to hear from. You will have 3 minutes to say your piece once the timer goes off. Unfortunately, your time has run out. For now, can I have Kathy Wang please come on up to the front?
Hi, my name is Kathy Wen. I'm not sure you recognize me. In December meeting, there were only 3 of us here, and you asked us to. I knew nothing about the plan. I only listened to the priority of the goals and the sequences. But it was only until this week. I think the master plan draft was released. Was that last week or this week? When was it? The draft of the master plan, when did it release it to the public?
Yeah, I think it was around the 10th.
Well, anyway, this month, right?
Yeah.
Very recently.
Earlier this month.
Yeah. So I got to study, kind of briefly reviewed it. And I was surprised to find it out that the outreach reached over 10,000 people, and I wasn't one of them. Maybe I was very ignorant. I should be more involved. So, and I did find the lawn sign at Jolliman Park on Tuesday. So it was a good sign to reach out to let people know the master plan, which will impact our city's, our life in the next 20 years. So I have 2 questions. One is, what is the decision-making process for coming up with such a master plan? I went online and I saw there's a master plan advisory committee or board but most of them are the, I don't want to call them a special interest group, the cricket, the soccer, but I didn't find any grassroots or residents, like people like me. I'm not associated with any, the league or things. How did, would your committee, reached out to people like residents, grassroots? That representation is missing from there. And also, I did find it out on your page 104, which listed the major project funding, out of which, of the total budget, $204 million for the 20 years, $100 million is contributed to a performance and a fine arts center. I'm just wondering how that decision is made, because 50% of the total budget is contributed to one project. And we need more part. I don't know whether Performance Arts Center has a lot to do with the parks. So those are my 2 questions. One is the decision-making process. The other is the budget allocation for the Performing Arts Center. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comments and your feedback. Next up, we have, and I'm sorry if I mispronounced this, but Chin Pan.
My name is Chin Pan, and nice to see them again. Actually, I'm one of the few residents show up yesterday, and the only way I know it is because one of my friends live in the east side. She told me that, and I said I happen to have time, so I figure, okay, I just walk in. Before I walk in, I know nothing about this plan exists. So I'm not sure where all those outreaches came from, and all my knowledge about this master plan actually was gained yesterday. And I really appreciate, Gail, you are hardworking for summarizing very accurately what's happening last night, all the comments. And then when I get home, one shocking factor to me is the performing arts, which is budgeted at $100 million plus the swimming pool, $60 million. That's probably counting for majority of the budget of the $200 million in the next 20 years. And I'm very shocking to find out why is that. I questioned Gail yesterday. I said, where this came from? And after I get home, then, I'm very curious, and I went to online and find this survey. Can I put it here? Is this going to show? Is this going to show on the screen? Yeah. So this is a survey I find out on the Cupertino website, regarding the master plan survey. In the survey, actually, I don't know how many patients. I'm a statistician. I have a PhD in statistics. So I know where data came from, and the data tells the story, and the decision process must came from data. And this happened to, for survey data is my specialties. And 0 Chinese is taking this particular survey, and 63% is Caucasian. I'm very curious who knows the result, who knows the sample size, how many people are taking this survey. And, in this particular survey, performing arts indeed is actually very high, rank there. So I think if you drive the decision based on this survey, you did a great job. However, the foundation for this survey is not to represent this community, is not to represent, what are the people in this community. And I think we need to have a more reliable data, particularly on the east side. Yesterday I hear a lot of difficulties like, yes, we want this park, but. So because of those but, we have $0 allocated to east side park. What if that, whatever the Mitty Lawrence Park, what if that work out? Where that money going to come from? I actually went to that workshop as well when I think at the time was Mayor Darcy Paul, and he gave us a tour of that particular area. It's a beautiful location, it's an area. What if it works out? And my friend Estide, she have little kids, she cannot join, so she just want me to do her favor. I said, okay, I will come. And so I really want to know, the foundation of the master plan based on this survey have something to be in question. So thank you.
Thank you very, very much for your feedback. All right, next up we have Kitty Moore.
Good evening. I think the plan is it's coming together. Some of the confusion I have is that it looks like it's kind of a broad brush plan. And I know that you've had some discussion about having the universal inclusive playground at Jollyman. So I'm wondering, when I look at this plan, is it set in stone that it's going to be at that location? And there was already maybe about $5 million allocated to it. And I did look at the Palo Alto plan and their mitigated negative declaration, and you mentioned that you're going to be going through the environmental impact requirements, and I saw that MIG had also done that plan. So I'm wondering where we are in relation to, when I look at that plan, are we still at kind of some initial stage, and are things going to be kind of moving around, like I'm talking about the Jollyman plan? Okay, so a couple of things that I really liked. The teen comments are awesome. I was really glad to see that looked like everyone you spoke to is concerned about equity. I live on the east side, and I have some concern about how the park availability is being measured, because you have areas of denser population and little tiny parks. So, if we're considering the 0.75 acre park at Main Street, you have a lot of people that are trying to access that. You've got, 242 units at 19800 Wolf, 120 units at Main Street, and then another around 100 or so at Metropolitan, and that's just in the really close-in area. And that's and you've got about 1,000 Apple employees just at Main Street. So that's kind of an overburdened area, and it's not really useful for a lot of sports and things. I hope that Lawrence Mitty moves forward. I'm a little disappointed that that stopped. I am not interested in having roof count as parkland, and I know the developer wrote a letter, in December wanting it to be counted in their plan. I am very much interested in having a gym continue on the east side. We have the Bay Club, it's awesome. I would like to see, a gym out in that direction, and hopefully something that, if it can be done, that the city would own it and operate it. I'd like to see what that would look like. I know my kids were at Cupertino High School. Badminton's very important. Lights on the trail. I think you really better ask the neighbors. I think that you're going to have a line of people showing up. And I hope that with the developments that there's something you can do to maintain the ice rink and the bowling alley. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you so much. All right, next up we have Rhoda Fry. Please come on up.
I actually typed up my comments before running over here tonight. I think equity is a big deal. I was also very surprised to hear about this recent survey, because the last time a survey was done, again, the demographics of the survey did not match the demographics of the community. So I think somehow we need to work harder about matching this up. Okay, so I like the conservation and looking for partnerships. Having been a 35-year resident of Cupertino, I recommend against adding water features. Too many times we've seen water features installed and languish empty, sometimes for years on end. We even had issues with the water features out here at the library. They're expensive to maintain. Linda Vista Park, Memorial Park, and Quinlan. All water features have failed. Particularly in our water-starved climate, we should be avoiding adding water features. Speaking of water, however, the Blackberry Farm Golf Course has previously been watered with on-site water. Now, it is watered using potable water at a huge expense. I don't know what that expense is right now, but I think the community should know what we're paying to water the golf course, because we didn't used to have to pay to water the golf course. We need to fix this. We also had naturalized ponds at the golf course. I'm sure Gail Sees can shed some light on that as well. And they were of particular interest to the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. So they also, of course, had aesthetic value, but they had conservation value as well. With respect to the Blackberry Farm Pool and Picnic business, had previously been in an enterprise fund. What happened? It's kind of run like a business. Seems to me that it should be an enterprise fund, just as the golf course. My neighbors had actually previously owned Blackberry Farm, and they had a specific commercial season because that's when they could make money. Not that the city should necessarily be making money or losing money, but running the pools off season would be a huge money drain on the city, and the city had tried it years ago during the school year, and it created significant traffic and safety issues. At Blackberry Farm, we need to replace the dead trees in the parking lot. The ones that were planted never really took. I think that the golf is good. I know it's not super popular right now, but as more golf courses close, Cupertino might wind up being so-called the only game in town. And regarding this public-private issues, and I really like how global the plan was, when the homes at Oak Valley were built, a promise was made to open an entrance at the existing driveway off of Stevens Creek Road, which is also called Permanente Road, into Rancho San Antonio. We're waiting for it to happen, and it would provide more park access without the drive for many residents. I'm not one of them. And there are plenty of places in the Bay Area where there are railroad tracks that cross a road without a railroad crossing or even run through the middle of a road. So please, let's look at that again. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your time and for your comments. All right, Emily Scheck, if you want to come forward.
Hello, my name is Emily Scheck. I have been a resident of San Jose for over 30 years, and for the last 10 years, we came to Cupertino. There are a lot of things we love about Cupertino, but then I want to bring a perspective about what I see in San Jose. San Jose has built a lot of different branch libraries, and some of the provisions are really very nice. For example, at the Vineland Library, they have a very big community room at the entrance, and it is fully used. For example, we can find free yoga classes there. And the other library that has new stuff is on Bascom. And it's just going into the library at a public area. They have just something very simple and very inexpensive, air hockey table. I remember going there and having fun there. The other day, I saw a hockey table at Costco, and I asked my husband, it's only $200, can we get one? And he said, no, we don't have room for it. So it's these little simple pleasures that I think that cost very little money that I would like you to consider to bring to the city of Cupertino. I like to see things that are free and unscheduled. I like to see people having fun. And what about years ago? For example, there were parkours, outdoor exercise areas. What is the situation now? Is it coming back in a different way? We can have, look at different places where old people use the park and young people, the very youngest toddlers, use the park. What are good exercise equipment that's out there so that people can enjoy some exercise free? And also, this is I'd like to see also teenagers taken care of, because right now in all the areas, especially in Cupertino, the education is getting more and more college prep, and a lot of things are discarded. Like, for example, these days, unless the family encourages it, teenagers don't know how to cook, and when they go to college, they eat a lot of junk food, and they order takeout, and it's so convenient these days. They spend a lot of money because they can order everything and it can be delivered. It's like the culture is getting to be very materialistic, and I would like to see dollars used to bring people together and to help people learn in a way, and also teach them that, things don't have to be expensive to be enjoyable. So I think the Parks and Recreation can do something at low cost, and to encourage students to, for example, to come together and cook fresh food. And there's a very good program in Berkeley, the Edible School Garden, and they have a lot of that going on. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your comments. All right, Alicia Schober, come on up.
Good evening, commissioners. It's nice to see you again. Hello. In the spring of 2016, I, along with my Leadership 95014 group, presented to City Council and commissioners and city staff the idea of bringing all-inclusive playground to the city of Cupertino. And so I just wanted to say I'm very pleased to see that it is in the plan, and I really encourage the city to move forward with this. I think it will be a fantastic addition to the city, and I also want to thank you for your very hard work these past few years putting this plan together and contributing to our city's future by really thinking a lot about all the services, recreation, park activities that we can really benefit from. So thank you.
Thank you. And I think we actually heard from everyone, almost everyone, in attendance tonight. Excellent. So we can now move into the discussion section of today, which I anticipate is going to be meaty. Anybody want to go first? Or I can also, there were a couple of questions from the oral communications that we can also have answered at this time. Anybody want to go first? Okay. Any comments?
I'll start. I think what I'm hearing is that some people are hearing about this for the first time and they're surprised. And And some of the other comments that we've seen online are concerns about the costs of the big ticket items. And I'm wondering, how we communicate what we were doing in this plan, that it is not a budget, it is not a blueprint, it is not an approval for any of these things, in my mind, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that is my impression, is that we explored a lot of options. We talked to our communities to find out what their ideas were. We collected their ideas in a lot of public events, and it was a while ago, and so people may not remember. But when they see it now, and we're getting a broader view, and that's great that people are looking at it, but I'm concerned that people think that it is more than it is. And so I'd just like to hear your thoughts of what is it that we can do to present it better? Oh, I guess my time is up. Oh, that's a first. So one of my comments is, what can we do to communicate that better? Because I do think there are some misinterpretations about what we're presenting here. And that saddens me, because a lot of hard work has gone into it. And I think if people understand better that that we're providing some options that will be fully vetted at another time with the council with respect to the dollars and what the community is looking for in any particular place, that it will, people will have a better appreciation of what this document is.
You raised very good comments, and I appreciate you saying that this is not a budget, it's not a blueprint, that's not the intent of this plan. You are absolutely correct. And it's interesting when we look at the funding, the numbers that are put in the plan, the table is labeled as potential major new facilities, and these are planning level costs associated with them. We really put those numbers in to help the city make good decisions going forward. That's not to say that you are setting aside, or that we're even recommending you spend $100 million on a new performing and fine arts center. We're saying be aware of the very real costs associated with this. So be certain that you are looking at partnership opportunities and equity partners and others as you continue to vet and make good decisions about these going forward. So yes, there can be some minor changes in language in the plan to be clear that it is not a recommendation to spend this kind of money, certainly not saying that you should emphasize these big facilities over neighborhood parks, for example, since we heard that as a clear priority for many residents in ensuring equity across the system. I think we will look at the plan very carefully in terms of that language to make sure the message is clear. And I also think that, as liaisons to the community, your comments here tonight in recognizing that this isn't a budget or a blueprint are important. I think staff will continue to share that as well with people who are interested in this, and continue to invite residents going forward as specific site master plans are created and specific, capital budgets are created for different projects. The outreach is not finished with this plan. It will continue in the future.
Thank you.
If I could add as well, and try to be brief. When it comes to assigning these kind of dollar numbers for these projects, it's a real challenge, because they're based on assumptions that are based on other assumptions that are based on other assumptions. For instance, an aquatic facility could be a small 6-lane lap pool, or it could be something like we have in Morgan Hill that has, I think they have 4 or 5 large swimming pools and different kinds of aquatic, things to offer. The challenge is, without doing the program, and the program will take a couple of different, initiatives to complete it. In other words, it's driven by community interest and input. What do people want in terms of an aquatic facility? The second thing is, what then are the requirements in order to do it? In other words, if people want to have a 5-pool facility, that will dictate then a higher level or additional parking. So somewhere along the line, there has to be a compromise. There has to be decisions that are made, and those go to our city council, ultimately in terms of capital financing. So again, the aquatic facility, what we could do is kind of take our best thinking of what an aquatic facility may or may not look like in the city. And then on top of that, there are domino effects that occur as a result. So if we build a gymnasium or a aquatic facility or even a performing arts center, where do we put it? And if we put it somewhere in a park that already houses other important amenities, then there's a domino effect to move those amenities elsewhere. So again, many assumptions, and it's a challenge to figure out how to assign a number. It's even more difficult to assign an operations and maintenance cost without having the program. So for something like this plan, we know what the community has asked for, both in terms of short term, we want it, sooner than not, or longer term major investment, ideas. And from there, we'll march forward.
I think one of the values of putting the dollars in here is that it is a reality check on the wishes of the community. Because when we go out and we ask people, what do you want? We get a whole laundry list of what they want. And there's a lot of things, and there's a lot of things that cost a lot of money. And putting a number on it gives us a good reality check and allows the city council to say, oh, if we really want to do this, this is the kind of commitment we're going to need to make to it. So I think what's in here is a good start to give us a sense of how we need to decide to prioritize. And so I think that's a value. And then I think some of the comments seem to interpret it in a different way. And so I hope we can clarify that more going forward.
And tell the story. Some of these are very opportunistic, and that's really the key here, such as the all-inclusive playground. We received a grant, as you know, from Santa Clara County for a little over $1.4 million. Well, that's something we don't want to necessarily pass up. And so it may gain a higher level priority with our decision makers.
I might add, maybe me and Nisha and I may be the longest sitting commissioners. I think this is this is my 6th year listening to this. 6 years ago we started this plan, so there's been 6 years of outreach and lots and lots and lots of outreach. There is nothing on this plan that wasn't given to us by the community, someone in the community, and everything in here. There were passionate people who wanted their golf courses, passionate people who wanted their aquatic centers, passionate people who wanted their performing arts centers. So, in a perfect world, we'd have parks in every neighborhood and all of these things. But as Carol said, the reality is we have to, as we get closer and closer to really building this, one of the main things to do, which you've just done for us, is in fact take a look at what the pieces are, how much they cost, where we could put them, and then it's going to be a puzzle in the next step of this of how we can fit those in. And we have, we have years of community input, and we know, a lot of wonderful things people want to do. So now I guess our challenge will be to take this and put the pieces together. And so then that leads me to a question, actually. So there was also a slide in a presentation, I don't remember when, sometime last year, that was also very helpful that I hope the council sees, which was in one of your presentations, I think maybe this was yours, Gail, you put in also the funding sources. There was a great slide that also said, oh, is it in here? Okay, so that should be something. The different options. So it's not, as you said, we're getting a grant. That's something. We'd share something with the schools. The school has a grant, and can we piggyback on that? So they're not all going to be out of our operating costs. And so that was a very helpful slide showing also how we can take advantage of all the partnerships out there. So it brings me to my question. So now that we have this initial sort of request list, this goes to will go to council, and there'll be an open study February 5th, is that what you said? And you will present them this 140-page package, of which they've seen pieces of this or not? I mean, this is a lot of information to take. I mean, these people here in the audience who said they just found this, oh my gosh, this is a lot of information for you to take in a week. We've been at this for 4 years. So, and there are new people on the council. also might not have seen this. Has this been presented? Is this going to be presented in pieces? It's a lot of information.
Yes, the City Council has seen this in pieces as we have gone along. They saw it in, September 2017, February of 2018 in a joint study session with this body. They had a study session last June on it, and their next study session will be their next formal presentation. So the things that have gone to the commission, some of them have been staying apprised, and some of them it will be fresh information. And we are working to help our newest council members get up to speed and provide information and background so they can catch up to where the other council members are. Yeah, it is a lot of information. We agree.
All right, so I did want to make sure that we addressed some of the questions that came from members of the audience. We did address the fact that we are not a blueprint. We're not guaranteeing or saying that we should support, specific big ticket items or not. This is just informative for us to be able to show City Council that yes, members of the community have asked for something, this is what it would cost, this is what it would look like, and we've done that kind of financial specking for all of the different requests that community members have made. I did want to talk a little bit about our outreach strategy and our outreach methodology. I remember with a couple iterations ago of the commission, we had actually, when initially we had done this, and I'm not even sure if that was before MIG got involved. It was, right? It was a previous consultant group that was working on this, and they were coming up with survey data that was not necessarily reflective of the demographics of the community, and that is something that and I know most of or all the people on this commission are particularly sensitive to. We do want to make sure that we're very representative of what our community needs, and so we did shift from them because we did not see that, and sometimes it's difficult to get proper data, which is one of the reasons that we did start the advisory group, so we can make sure that community groups are represented in those ways, but that's not the only way. We have done several touch points in front of the library at various community events. So I was wondering if you could speak to the other outreach strategies that we've had, not just for the draft plan, because that is more of a summation of many years, 4 years. But can you just speak to a little bit of that? Because I also specifically remember looking at and I'm closing my eyes because that's how I remember things, looking at a table that actually outlined the different demographics, the different genders, and then the different age groups corresponded to those different age groups, overlaid with the kinds of requests that were made. And that, I believe, is something that you guys took into consideration. I don't remember which meeting. I think that was beginning of last year, maybe like May or April, I think. But do you remember the one I'm talking about? It's like a huge like South Asian man of 40 years old is interest, like you see interests with like this and this, and then like Chinese American this type are interested in this. I like clearly remember that, but I can't put my finger on which meeting it was in, but I know that we specifically looked at that because that was something that we were focused on.
One other thing, I'm sure when we hired you and you received all of the data, because we had done 1.5 years of outreach. We had gotten to the outreach with our other consultant, and you were given all that, right? Yes?
Yes, we did receive the data, and we actually worked very strongly to reinterpret some of the findings from that data, recognizing where findings were more representative and involved more of the community, and also recognizing the limitations of where the data did not represent a strong portion of the community. So we made sure to create a more balanced approach and not take a meeting that was attended by 3 people and say this reflects what we heard across the outreach forums.
Yes, I would also add that there's a chart we did based on the summer 2017 citywide survey, which had over 1,200 respondents. And in that survey, we did invite people to share their demographic data to the extent that they were willing about age, what cultural or ethnic group they identified with, and a number of other points, whether they did or didn't have children under 18 at home, whether they were or were not a resident. And we've shared findings. We can break down the findings from that questionnaire based on those responses. When we got to that point of the survey, there were over 900 people that were still providing input. And we did do a chart that you have seen and the council has seen that shared feedback about what recreation activities those folks' family members, they or their family members participated in, and what were the top 20 across all respondents. Then we broke it down by age groups and by ethnic groups for you to show that there were some commonalities, but there were some differences. Definitely by age and by cultural groups, we saw different popular activities. And that chart was shared with you in September, and it's been to the council. Yeah, and it's informative. It helps us see some of the popular activities that our recreation department can or does address and what some of the demand might be.
Excellent. So to just summarize / simplify, we don't look at one singular survey at all to justify what is in this. It's been a comprehensive review, and one of the things that MIG was tasked with is to make sure that we fill in any of the gaps, which I think we did quite a bit of outreach on, and then appropriately weigh those things to make sure that the communities that might not be represented in one survey or communities that might be overrepresented in one survey don't take over and or dominate. I remember one of our sessions had, it was at like 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock, and it was predominantly senior citizens voting on it. And that's, as not a senior citizen, I, was acutely aware of that as well. But that, just to make it very clear that this is it's a comprehensive with an emphasis when we are missing specific sets of data and data points, correct?
I actually have a comment here. We see in the last few months or a couple of years, we have done a lot of outreach. In spite of advertising, like yesterday's meeting, where only 3 people showed up, it seems like the city is doing the outreach, but there is less participation. So I was wondering, the electronic input card that we have on website, is there, like people are now warming up, people are getting aware, it takes some time. The signs are in the parks, people are getting aware, they might see it. How long do we have that card that open for people to give their inputs?
Yeah, we're hoping for the more input, the faster, the better. Will all be great. We are intending to continue accepting input on this draft master plan through February. Okay. And then by that we will need to compile it and refine and revise our report and bring it back in order to hit our schedule goals. But yeah, we'll continue to invite feedback from folks. The earlier the better, we can share it more widely. But of course, we're looking for any and all kinds of thoughts from our community, positive, negative, more of, less of, it's all good.
So it would be nice to also highlight that along with that information saying accepting input till February. So people might, otherwise it just say, okay, I'll do it, or I'll send it, or, just
to give a
deadline so people would, and also community will, even on those signs in the parks, if we can add that. Okay.
Excellent. So we talked about the demographics, the diversity of outreach. It is still open. So for those folks in the audience, if you have friends that have not filled it out, we have time for that. So please do share it with your colleagues. It is on Nextdoor. Yes. It is on most of anything that the city physically touches, it's on those channels, but if you guys are outside of any of those channels, please, please, please do share it so we can make sure to be as inclusive as possible. We discussed the cost of facilities, the water features, actually that was a conversation that we had as a commission as well. Blackberry Farm water feature, I actually was made aware of that, I think the last time you had spoken about it. So would you guys mind just briefly chatting about that? I just want to make sure that we address all of the things that our community members discussed.
There was comments about the golf course ponds and the water source for them. They were originally fed by a well that's a very old well dating back to the 1940s. That well pumped water to a reservoir, and that water was used on the golf course through an old and aging system. That system failed in 2002. The metal tank failed, and some other elements. And from that time forward, my understanding is that the golf course has been watered with their fallback source, which is potable water. The well has been proposed for bringing it back online, and a study was done about using the well in collaboration with making sure it wouldn't affect creek flows. That is a possibility. There was information that went forward to our city council a couple of years ago with a recommendation to renovate the golf course and its irrigation and bring that well supply back online. That project was deferred. It's been deferred a couple of times, and then it was associated with the Stevens Creek Corridor Master Plan, and our city council has deferred that project to make sure that we look at our citywide needs before we make choices about investing in one particular area, to look at what our wider needs longer term will be.
Great, thank you.
If I could add real quick, because another question came up. The city spends approximately $80,000 a year on that water supply. So.
All right, let's see. The all-inclusive playground. I did specifically want to, and please correct me if I'm wrong about this, we did a series of site testings on the all-inclusive playground around Cupertino at many of the sites. And we did determine as a commission that Jollyman was the best, and gave recommendations on the spots within Jollyman for a couple of reasons. One is people's ability to get there, also how it would displace other services, other activities, other sports facilities, things like that. Jollyman was considered to be the least in terms of disrupting that, while at the same time ensuring that some of the specific needs for an all-inclusive playground were met. You don't necessarily want it to be in a super loud area. You want shade, some things that are necessary for that kind of a build. And then this did go to council, and then we did submit for the grant, which we did get, yay. And so that's why a couple people have brought it up. So I just want to say that is a project that is a higher priority, because we do have dollars on the table, and we have done, as a commission and the council and our staff doing an excellent job, it's been moving forward, correct?
Yes.
Great. All right, well, the couple that were here that were talking about library community rooms is gone. So, okay, cool. So I know we have a couple of questions, and I do want to make sure that we get into our comments and feedback section, which is there anything we suggest adding or changing to the plan? Do we have specific feedback that we would like to send to the city? And if there's anything well, community members have already responded, so those are our two bullet points. Commissioners, we can't not have thoughts.
I was just going to say, I'm sorry, I'm late. Anyway, it seems pretty comprehensive, and to your point that this is pretty much the feedback that we've gotten from our community for the last, I thought it was 3 years, but maybe it's been 4 or 5. And it's very comprehensive, and the themes, the 12, I think it's themes that rose to the top from the input that we got from our community, they sort of stand out, and then everything sort of falls under that and the goals. So I do feel like, yeah, like you said, this is not a plan, it's a work in process, and it really does encompass everything that our community has told us they're interested in seeing. So that's my comment.
Oh, I just wanted to say thank you for a wonderful document. Some of the comments were the readability of the document is easy. You can understand, you can follow through. It's very well written, so it's easy to understand what's going on, and the goals have been very clearly defined. The language is very good. So for people who want to take their time reading it, it's not hard to understand what's going on. One of the comments though I had was the goals, which says MP1, MP2. It may be good to highlight that they are not a particular priority.
Yeah.
It seems like they are in the order of priority, so just to be very clear that they are just specific goals, but the priority is not set in.
Good point.
And this is very specific, but that in our park system, and we talk about improvements and addition and stuff like that, we want to add that feature of maybe have some adult exercise features into the parks, which is not, because when we think of parks and play structure, we always think of kids and young adults, but not adults who, a lot of our population is aging and they would want to do outdoor activities, so if we can add that kind of thing in.
And as a clarifying question, you're specifically suggesting outdoor exercise equipment for adults? Okay,
yes.
So whether it's a park course or greenfield style, things like you'd use in a gym, but they're outside. Okay. Okay.
That, or,
some
workout equipment.
Good. It's in there, but it's not strongly highlighted, and you're not the first person that has suggested it warrants stronger emphasis. Thank you.
I was going to say, I think one of our the people that came up here, and also that was you had us, our homework was supposed to be come back with a list, and that was also on my list.
I'll make a third on that. So our homework was specifics, and that was somewhere buried. But I think we also saw a slide, one of these many times, with the population, the aging population, and seniors rose to the top.
Yes.
So I know we have a very diverse group, but there's a strong senior population. So there should be a strong push for, I think the park courses or greenfields or something, or expanded senior center activities that might include exercise, outdoor exercise.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I guess from a perspective of what to think, this is not the end of input either. And this is, we're coming to finish the master plan, which has the overriding goals and themes. And I think one of the most important parts about it, I think it's in Appendix G, is the prioritization and how we weight the prioritization, how we will rate projects going forward. And are the weightings and the criteria the things that our community thinks should be in the list? Because that's what's going to drive us towards the specifics of whatever we're going to do. So if those priorities are wrong, when we come to trying to get a very objective view of a particular project, we don't want to be just getting to the point of I want, you want. We want to have these overreaching goals and be able to measure how does a particular project measure up against these goals. And so if the criteria is good, then we will get to projects that the community wants. And so if the community has different ideas on what the criteria should be, that's what's going to determine what ends up in your neighborhood park or in the bigger parks around the city, I think. So to me, that was one of the keys of this, a culmination of everything that we've done. I mean, a lot of it is gathering the data, and the data is the data. It's the people we talk to. And then when we get to specific plans, there will be more opportunity for input from the community of what they want in a particular place. And then when we evaluate it, it will be those priorities and criteria that we measure against, so that we're not changing how we do things on a whim.
Yeah.
That we have a methodology to go by, and that people have agreed upon. And so people still may or may not like the outcome, but at least we can point to something and say, you know, this is, we laid it all out for you, this is how we were going to do it, and then we need to go forward and do it that way. So I think that's a really critical feature of the whole plan for me. So I really like that, and I think maybe that should be highlighted to the council as well. Are they on board with those criteria? Because, you know, some of them are weighted more heavily than others. Are those the right things?
Thank you.
Great, so,
Because eventually, we're going to have to pick between
That's right.
a
Yes.
basketball court and an aquatic center
Yes.
and a performing arts center and horse trails. I mean, we got great ideas from our community, but eventually, we, with some methodology, are going to put a, what is it? Something in the ground. Thank you. Stake in the ground that says this park is going to have this facility and it costs this much money. I mean, that's the eventual goal from this
And this is
big,
a
long
20-year
plan.
plan, right? It's
Exactly.
And it's a
20 years.
20-year plan.
We don't know what the next exciting thing is going to be. And some of the trends we go through, I mean, we didn't even know about all-inclusive playgrounds 5 years ago. And so if we had had something that was very specific, maybe that wouldn't have fit in. But we want is the guidelines that tell us we want to get the most enjoyment for the most amount of people, and how do we achieve that? And that's, in my mind, what a master plan is doing, is giving us the path and the roadmap to do it. And so the all-inclusive playgrounds came out of our 95014 program. You know, the last program,
Midway.
it was dog parks. And if you read the materials coming out of the National Parks and Rec Association, dog parks are one of the biggest trending items. So they're not addressed in this specifically, but we may see that. So what we need to do is be prepared to evaluate it, whether it's dog parks or it's something else. Who knows what it will be, and I'm not saying it's that. Are we going to be able to evaluate based on the criteria of how do we give our community the most enjoyment for the bucks?
And I think it's very interesting that this whole process is a guideline for next 20 years, and being able to do the outreach with 15, 16-year-olds and get their input. We're hoping that those are the ones who are actually be there to enjoy this. So this is a great collection of ideas from when they were little or teens to when they get adult, and see how this whole guidance has, you know, changed the outlook of the park system in Cupertino. So this outreach, I was quite impressed with the teen turnout, 50 people. Each of them have a comment card and thoughtful comments.
Yeah.
They did pay attention to it, so we should really look at those, and they were very clear what they wanted. So that's a very good, you know, addition to this document, is guidance going forward in 20 years. So.
Also, when we first started, I had not a clue how you would take a master plan from 20,000 residents giving us 20,000 ideas with no budget, no anything, and get it down to this. So this process has been great, and I just would like to say thank you that I had not a clue how this was going to be done, but it's done really well, I think, and it will. Our city will really benefit from this very long and extensive exercise, and it's really great that it's coming to fruition. Thank you.
so I have a list, so we'll go through those. First off, and kind of touching on what was said before, the idea that this is a 20-year plan and things do change. One of the things I would like to, you know, make sure is considered in as we continue this final planning process is gray. I forget, it was like called gray spaces or gray areas, basically where we look at the kind of physical impact we're having on a space and how permanent that structure is, or needs to be, and making sure that we're not overpopulating with permanent structures, just because things do change pretty rapidly, and they will continue to change even more so quickly over the next 20 years. And so I just want to make sure that, you know, those things are accounted for. However, I say that, and then what I'm saying next is also kind of the reverse. One of the challenges, as we say, connectivity, and actually a couple of the youth had written in like a shuttle service in there as well, which is my personal dream, is to not have to take a car around Cupertino. Parking. If we cannot have places for people to put their cars, we should not have that thing there. It's just going to cause too much of a bottleneck, it'll cause too much traffic, and it will eventually become a hazard. However, we can alleviate that by emphasizing to City Council the need for a shuttle service that doesn't just work for seniors, but can work for everyone. I think we're piloting it right now, and from what I've heard, it's been doing pretty decently. But I would like to see that expanded, and I would like to see that featured in our connectivity section a little bit higher up as a priority. I did want to cover the cricket field. Nobody, and I've talked to the people in the organization, is expecting an international sized cricket field. So if that is the perspective that we're taking, that is not reflecting what the community wants, that's not reflecting what the community needs, and that's physically impossible in Cupertino.
We did a feasibility study on that one, didn't we?
Yeah, but that was all for an international cricket field, which is just not what they were looking for. They just wanted a place where people wouldn't walk over the pitch in the rain. And that's not that hard, and the library area is very small. So I think that we could find areas to have a smaller cricket field that won't get damaged on a regular basis, especially since we have the #1 in the country, and with one tiny little field. I do think that we should incorporate, especially the Cupertino Loop Trail, into our plan and name it as that is our priority, along with really explicitly naming some of the regional priorities that we have too. I love that connectivity is prominently featured throughout the whole thing. Me just beating that old drum again. But that was really exciting to see, and I would love for the Bike Ped Commission to also, their feedback to be like integrally incorporated in that, especially for that one. I think that the inclusion of trailhead amenities should be pretty consistent, and that's something that we talked about, but that's more of an like logistical implementation side of it. I don't know if that necessarily has to be included here, but I would like to see that. Again, I know that this is just a plan, this is not the actual nuts and bolts, but I would like to see that when we do get to that point. Parklets, bigger emphasis on parklets. This is something that we had started talking about 5 years ago. I think it's really our only true solution to the lack of park space on the east side is smaller, like micro parks where people can do activities or just at least sit in some semblance of nature, just given the strictness of the physical constraints that we have in that area. And the multi-use facilities. So I did not actually see that reflected too much in the plan, and that is something that I would like to see. There's no reason that we can't layer a lot of these things on top of each other, why we can't have maybe a larger, lifelong learning center, which actually has the teen center and the senior center inside of it. Or, something that is a fitness center that has, an aquatic facility, but also has basketball courts on top of it. I would like to see what that intersection looks like, so we're not building, 35 new buildings for each individual sport or each individual activity or recreation service. We can combine it. And also diversity. It is reflected when you read deeper into it. I just feel like we lose a little bit when we go super high level about the diversity and inclusion, which just hearing about already makes me nervous that if we're not transparent with the fact that we have been super focused on this, then we're going to continue to get feedback like that. That doesn't necessarily reflect the work that y'all have done. So if there's a way that we can more prominently feature that in one of the core 6 or 8, communicated in the master plan goal bullets, that we have accounted for diversity of, and just list off a bunch, and then say et cetera, because we'll never be able to get all of them listed on one thing, but something that makes it very, very transparent, that we have had that as like a primary focus, I think would be super helpful. Now those were super specific. My last thing, because why not? Golf course. We have 2. Do we want to invest $5 million into rebuilding the golf course when we have another one across the street? Just putting that out there. Maybe that goes lower on the totem pole than, say, creating diverse experiences for folks across Cupertino.
Okay.
Great. Anyone else? I'm the only one.
Actually, I wanted to, you mentioned Cupertino Loop. Do we have a overlay of bike ped plan with the priorities of Park and Rec? Because both of us have trails and connectivity as quite an important item. Is there something which may kind of work? Because there's another commission or another group working on trail system and connectivity. How can we leverage that in this plan?
So I just want to make sure that you're saying we look at what they've proposed and what's been approved,
Or
and
what
all
has
of
been
that,
approved,
and then we can
then
actually
see-
use that to
Yes.
influence where we put the different things.
I thought we had an overlay. I thought we
We
did an
have-
overlay.
We had one, right, a
I
while
thought we
ago?
did an overlay about the
Can't
bike
remember
ped
now.
Yeah, they had the
plans.
Indeed, and in
Proposed
Appendix
one
D, that
Okay.
map is presented so that you
That is
can
overlay?
see the interactions between the pedestrian plan, the bicycle plan,
Okay.
as well as what was in the general plan, and looking at
Okay.
regional plans and what the priorities are specifically for parks.
Excellent. Thank you. Anything else?
Well, I did homework because I thought we were going to come in and talk about kind of the big picture, the 3,000 feet high or whatever. I don't know. That's what I remember from last time. And then maybe specifics that we as individual commissioners feel are important to us or would like to see highlighted, which I think is what you just did, Nisha. So I think the big picture for me is already in the plan. The connectivity, that was a big thing for us. So that we could connect our parks and our green spaces to our civic gathering spaces. That's really kind of what it's about. And to encourage walking and biking in our community. And so I was glad to see the Bike Ped Commission talking about the Cupertino Loop Trail and putting that in there specifically. So that was a good thing to bring up. And then I think we've also talked about how to sort of get away from the traditional parks that are swaths of green lawn and really look more at natural features, natural play, for children and adults, because adults like to walk in nature. So I think that we have to think to the future about a park, and a park is not static.
Yeah.
I guess that's what I'm trying to say. And it's not really just about parks, it's about the programming. I mean, we're looking at programming too in our parks and recreation system. And so I do think we have to really think about customer service. I think that would be important to me.
Yes.
And then, of course, financial stability and safety, public-private partnerships. A lot of people have been talking about those. For me, specifics, I love history, so I'd really like to see, I didn't read the 209 pages. I kind of looked over it, but we've talked about this a lot, and I haven't seen history or preserving what is left of our past history in this community preserved much. We don't have much to preserve, and I'd like that to be a priority for me. So specifically, that would be the McClellan Ranch Barn. And then I do think it's important to hopefully Lawrence Mitty Park. I mean, I know there's a lot of negotiations going on there, and I realize there's lots of different entities involved, but to me that would be a priority, especially because the east side needs more parks, and that's also a very natural space, and I could see that kind of being developed that way. For me, an aquatic center is important. It seems to be important to a lot of people in the community. And then, like Jeff said, it depends on what that looks like, and then that'll be determined going forward. And also another thing that's important to me is off-leash dog areas in our parks, because I think that will be more and more important going forward. The outdoor fitness equipment was something on my list, and the all-inclusive play area, which is already going. So anyway, that was my list.
I did want to, a couple of people did bring up the aquatic center. It's my understanding that we have done preliminary research, and we got on one of the maps a list of all the places that we have pools in Cupertino that are public, private, and public/private. However, there is extremely high demand, and because of certain limitations of Blackberry Farm, we can't have that area open year-round. So even though we do have swim facilities available in Cupertino, they are not necessarily actually available because the demand is very high. And this is not from us collecting survey information. This is actually I've actually talked to a number of these places. They don't have space to let us use those facilities. Yeah, they're not really public, and they're not willing to have a public-private partnership because they're filled up. And so I talked to four places, and they all said the same thing. So that was one of the, speaking to your point. Right. I forgot the healing garden. Yeah. That was one of the things that was brought by one of the sister cities groups, but could be applied to several different cultures as well. I know it's really present in Chinese culture and definitely in South Asian culture. Would love to see that, and then having a space where people can either do Tai Chi or yoga or something that's a little bit more peaceful, and not necessarily, I don't necessarily like going to the park doing yoga and then having somebody run like 30 miles in circles around me. So something that might be a little bit more conducive to that would be amazing. And we already know that our sister city would be happy to provide us with the plants that we would put in there. So that would be cool to see as well, provided that it's not an invasive species that's going to take over everything.
Thank you. Okay, I'll give mine also, I guess, 30,000 feet. So I'll play devil's advocate a little bit. So we are so lucky to be surrounded by so much open space. So for the people who really want open space, no one's going to go downtown Cupertino when we have, we can walk to the ocean from here in open space, and there's Rancho and Fremont Older. So what I heard a lot from the community is they want to recreate, which of course is part of our mission also. So when we heard lots and lots of people who wanted swimming, and they wanted performing arts, and they wanted basketball, and they wanted courts to play on, and they wanted gymnasiums. So my thoughts is we're stuck with what we're stuck with, but we have 3 or 4 large parks that can be turned into recreating parks as opposed to open space, since we have open space. And the big parks, 2 or 3 big parks that we have, I would like to see recreating, and whether that is an aquatic center, a multi-purpose gymnasium, senior center, teen center, gathering, to use our inner city parks for gathering community spaces. So that would be high on my list. The adult playgrounds was high on my list. And I forgot about the garden. I think that would be so important to find a place somewhere for the healing garden, because that really crosses all cultures, old and young. It really would be a wonderful thing to have in our city. And of course, the all-inclusive playground, which was very high on my list. And then dog parks. We've talked about them for years, and I know, again, like everything, half the community comes in terrified of it, and half the community comes in energized about them. But I can't imagine that we can't find a solution and a compromise somewhere in our parks that allow for open space dog play. So, yeah, and I wish we had lots of money to do all those things. But, I think we have enough large park spots to put in a number of those things. And as Nisha said, it doesn't have to be an Olympic-sized pool or an international-sized cricket field. It could be the pieces of those so that people can recreate in all our parks. And the east side, of course, which is developed into higher density and less parks. Parklets are a great way of just creating spaces, since I'm not sure how we would create a big park there unless someone wanted to donate their houses to us. So, you know, we should keep in mind parklets whenever we can.
So actually, east side, as you mentioned, the parks, lack of parks. How do we, there's no land to make a park. So what do we do? Like, what is the methodology to get to if we want a park? Do we buy property, houses, businesses, convert them into park? I mean, it would be nice to know how to achieve that, because it seems like there's like half of the city wants that. And how do
It's going to require some very creative solutions. It may very likely require additional partnerships, maybe additional joint use agreements with our schools.
Right.
There are opportunities. We just have to really be creative in order to find them.
Okay.
As the population grows, the challenge becomes even more to stay and find ourselves within that, 3 acres per thousand standard, or from the general plan, even to aspire to be 5 acres per thousand, which the math is very difficult to find that kind of space without severely impacting, I think, the housing responsibilities.
So I think since this is a 20-year plan, I mean, written into the plan should be always looking for creative spaces, especially on the east side. And I'm not sure if that's written somewhere, but it's a 20-year plan, and who knows, some shopping center might donate the land to us. You never know, but we should
awesome.
state it as a goal in our plan.
Well, and the general plan actually calls out the need to not accept fees in lieu of land dedicated by developers. However, that's specific to areas that are park deficient, if I remember right. Well, this plan now identifies areas and gaps of where we are, deficient. We kind of already knew, but this now adds credibility and credence to those ideas.
I was just saying there is a mention of that in here under the potential,
Location
page
opportunities.
197. Yeah, real property donations, land trust, it's in here.
Oh, I was just going to say that, the general plan has a number of things that we have been addressing as we work through this plan. And there is the opportunity to use the findings we have come up with about what areas are deficient in walkable acreage. Given those maps D3 and D4, those can be used to help update the way that our city approaches receiving parkland dedications or park in lieu fees. It gives some more informed data and information that can be used to refine how those processes work. And I'm not sure that the general plan addresses what you can and can't do with the fees, but this will help us do a better job at addressing the underserved areas.
Excellent.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know if you're looking for specific things from each commissioner or not. I agree.
We didn't, but now we
but
do know.
Yeah, right. I don't know if you want me to restate those, or the dog parks, the other things. But programming in the parks and I think Nisha was alluding to this, of maybe a quiet Tai Chi class, or when I was recently in China, and you go to their parks and they are doing all sorts of classes for physical fitness in their parks that are being provided, and people are just coming out, and it goes along with the neighborhood events thing, and it's part of community building. So as I'm looking at what are the things that we can be providing that will enhance our community building, and that's our relationships with our neighbors, to get to know them, personally, not as someone who is for or against Valco, but as your neighbor who has kids going to your same school, or also has a dog, or also has a challenge in their life of an aging parent, or whatever it is. And when you make those personal connections, then we have people who care about each other. And I think will lead to a better community, and it will make it more enjoyable for us to live here. And I think that's what we want.
I will list my specifics too. I didn't do many of them. Expansion of neighborhood events.
Okay.
From being only 2 months to, because we have many more dry months, then, so expand those programs, especially the exercise ones can be much regular year-round activity rather than just the summer. Lawrence Meddy, if we can acquire that land, that would be awesome. It has a lot of potential of expansion, connecting to other trails. School partnerships.
Yes.
As much effort can be put in because there is space, they are good partners, and the population uses that and live here. The students are living here in the community, so that partnership, if we can make it, prioritize and make it happen faster, that would be great.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts? Cool. So I have one final thing, which is I recognize that Cupertino as a city is aging. But I know that people want us to be fiscally responsible, which I know that we will be. However, I do want the council to understand that if we don't invest in our parks and our recreation services in a way that will keep people who are younger in this city, it is going to cause a massive problem in the future that we will have to deal with. And that means that's everything from lower tax base, not having people pay bonds because they age out of having to pay them. There's people not moving out of their homes, meaning that families can't move in, meaning that school districts will lose their students, which means the whole, our property values will drop, the community, people will not want to live here anymore. And us investing in our parks, us investing in our recreation services is essentially an investment in the long-term health and sustainability of Cupertino. And knowing the changes that we've seen, I do want to make sure that that's explicitly clear to the council, because it might cost money, but it's going to save us a lot more when we can keep our people here and make this a place that is attractive to all ages and people like myself who would love to live here, not with family, but in my own home with my own family, because otherwise the city is just going to disappear. But this is amazing. And if we can execute everything in here, or at least the parts that our community wants to see the most, I think we have a bright light at the end of the tunnel with that gloomy remark. Anything else? No, if not, thank you so much. We know that this is going to still be a lot, and a lot of times seeing things in a master plan format aggregated all together can be a shell shock, even though that this has been 4 years in the coming. So thank you very much for all your hard work, and we will continue to pass along the links and anything else that we can do to help to make this process fluid. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, moving on to item number 2. So this was brought again on the agenda from last month's meeting. This is actually pretty interesting if you were interested in the master plan. This is basically the potential priority areas for the 2019 Recreation and Community Services Work Plan. It's part of the City Council approved city work plan, or to get them to approve it, and this is, so if you have any feedback or thoughts on things that we should be focusing on for 2019, there are blue cards up at the front on the right-hand side. Would love for you to fill them out.
Okay.
Jeff,
Well, if
do you want to
it-
give us a review of last week and why it's back on this and what our homework was to bring back ideas?
Exactly. The commissions, as you know, we've been undertaking some work trying to decide how is it that we can align kind of temporally the commissions with the city budget and with the city planned work plans. Our commissions have been proposing work plans, working on them, and then presenting them at different times. At some point, we end up seating new commissioners, electing a new chair, and then presenting a plan at some point that is most of the way accomplished. So the timing just hasn't really worked well. So if I could kind of go through a short list and kind of explain a little bit better here. Our city manager, our interim city manager, has asked for agenda time to come and speak with you next month. He's going to be making the rounds to all of the commissions in the city in order to continue the discussion that council had some time ago, several months back. And again, the intention with it is how do we align the work of each commission so that it aligns up with the overall work plan, so that it aligns with the city budgets, so that it makes sense in terms of timing with electing new chairs, so that a new commission, per se, can chart its own path. Those things happen in February and March, and then, of course, the work plan is effective as of the first part of July. Now, until Mr. Borden, our interim city manager, finishes his visits, reports to council, and council then gives us direction, we're starting to kind of get a little bit ahead of the game, but I think it's important to do so, because if we don't, we won't have time to provide the input into the city work plan that we need to do. So we have tentatively suggested that this be a kind of almost a study type work session like you generally do in August, but next month. In other words, we need to fast forward the work plan, and this is kind of hot off the press. Last month, I had not gotten and received the guidance from our city clerk, who's working on this process. But now, in the interim between last meeting and this, we've received it, and that's why I tried to communicate. Now, as far as your priorities, we could start talking about them tonight, brainstorm, or come back and kind of do the exercise next month. And Chair, you may even consider having the meeting at the community center, where we could have easels and, white paper, and, or at the library. They've got that room where you can draw over the walls. It's really neat. We might be able to get that. Yeah, it's got some real neat opportunities. But again, in terms of priorities, you may want to think about a horse trail advisory committee. Well, maybe not. Or, yeah, or however you want. Yeah, there are some items that I think are important, like the strategic plan that'll make it, that we'll be recommending to council to include on there. To talk on February 2nd, council has their goal setting, and I'll be present, sitting in the back of the room and listening. It may very likely be that they wish to have us deal with dogs off leash or deal with Sunday soccer. I don't know. But what I want to avoid is us going forward and starting to create that plan without each commission that we work with, and your commission here, having input into what that plan is going to be, and going through and creating your work plan and schedule as you have in the past, so that, again, it challenges the schedule a little bit, but I think it's the right thing to do. So again, it's your call at this point. We've not received guidance yet.
Excellent. So given that we did bring this up again for this meeting, and our homework was to think of ideas in these different segments, if the commissioners do have ideas, that they would like to share. And again, we will have another meeting in February to do a more in-depth dive, but this is also to give Jeff and our director and city staff an opportunity to kind of catch up to some of the higher level goals or specific goals that we might have that haven't been outlined here, so it can be included. But we do have a blue card. Yay! Katie Moore, come on up.
Hi. Okay, so I'm wondering who actually created the work plan request, and I'm a little concerned that maybe this is a relic of the previous council and we don't really know where your current council stands with these items. So that I'm concerned about. So for me, I would say wait until you've heard from them, because there might be some things that they want to drop off or prioritize differently. And then you mentioned Sunday soccer. Yeah, so I live on the east side near Creekside, and I can go into a whole thing about that. But if you go back to the old field use prioritization, it came out in like 2004, and the Danzies Soccer League is like a priority 7 because it has very low residency. And it's a huge organization. In one of your presentations, maybe 1,600 members. Cricket had 88. And if you take the fields away on Sunday, that's every day of the week you're allowing permitting. And then in terms of Creekside Park, you're in a deficient area, and now you're telling the residents, well, a couple of messages. Okay, so going to your master plan, you're saying you're going to get parklets, and then we're going to take away your Sunday field time too. So we're going to get not a great deal. So I would think about how the messaging is going to look to the residents when this item comes up. So also, with regards to the field permitting, the fees were $11 for residents and $88 for non-residents for that priority 7. And those were determined back in 2004, and we were told that those amounts, so I think for Sandanza we were giving you maybe $100,000 a year back in 2008. And we were told that was needed for the maintenance, and that you couldn't ask for us to pay more by some law than the maintenance amount. So, given that this amount has been the same since 2004, I'm wondering if that's a true statement, and is it time to revisit the fees and also the permitting that you're allowing? So, if it's really only 22% residents, I would consider whether you really want to allow Sunday soccer. So there's some issues. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, do we have ideas from the, I'm done talking. Do we have ideas from the commissioners on things that you would like to include in the new format of the public-private partnerships, operational efficiency, community livability, sustainable infrastructure, the financial stability, public engagement and transparency, as well as smart cities? All right, anything in smart cities from any of the commissioners?
I have an overall question first, which is process here. So in the past, our working session on doing this, which I hear, really the only request is change it, change the dates of it. Since July, August doesn't work, January, February works better. But the process might not need to be changed. So I felt like when we had this process, it wasn't top down to us, it was bottom up from you. Your staff came and talked a lot about the programs they were doing and what they liked and what they didn't like, what they wanted to see, get our opinions on them. You know, we can't tell you when something needs to be on a calendar, because you tell us when it needs to be on a calendar, because your staff does it. And, you know, if we say we want to see it in April and you say well, the budget doesn't happen till whatever. So the back and forth with the staff seemed to me a really major part of this planning process.
Yeah,
Has that changed?
No, we can certainly do that. I'd remind you that one of the kind of ideas that came out last year that led to the neighborhood programs, the idea was we need to look more closely at meeting the needs of the diverse community members. And so we took that idea and molded it into maybe there's opportunities that we can focus on Bollywood events or Chinese cultural celebration events. And we did that. And that came out of discussions from commission. That's where kind of, the genesis was. Now, with that said, we can provide kind of a list of those kind of hot items, and you can prioritize. We can do that fine next month. We can have that ready.
But
Absolutely.
it does also have to correspond now with the categories that council has given us, and we're basically putting them into these sections, correct?
Right, but I would caution us just a little bit in that we, again, have not received guidance that will continue with those same categories. Oh, yeah. And some of the goal setting on the 2nd of February with council may very likely change those. We don't know. I don't know.
In the case that, I have a couple things that I would just like to throw out there to see if the parks and the park staff sees as something that they also concur with. I would like to put it in front of them to get their feedback on some of our ideas. But I do think that it sounds like we need to have our August work plan meeting in February, but seeing as the session with council is happening on the 2nd, it makes sense for us to wait until the 7th to do the full thing.
Sure.
Is that in agreement with
That's what I was
the
going to say, and
Cool.
exactly. I think we need to be more prepared.
Agreed.
It would be great, Jeff, if, again, in the past, it's sort of been more informal. And around, we had, well, it would be great if we had that room with those fancy walls that you write on, but we had, it was a brainstorming session.
Yeah.
And it was with your staff. And I think in the past, there's some of your higher level staff came and told us what was, also it's sort of it went back and forth, also informing us what was on, your agenda that we didn't know about, what they were planning for, and then we helped prioritize those. Anyway, it was a working session.
Yeah. Okay, I think that sounds great.
Excellent. Okay, do we?
So, just a quick thing. So this would be in addition to our regular meeting?
Had been in the past, it doesn't have to be.
I think next February, in February
Our February
next
meeting
month,
is packed. We will likely need to have an additional meeting.
Actually,
or did things drop?
the things have dropped. We're really down to the
Great.
2 items, Mr. Borden's presentation and this one.
Perfect. Well, that worked out swimmingly for us. Excellent.
I have a question too, though. As we move through this, how do we plan to have flexibility as things come up? If there's an opportunity or something comes up that staff is working on that we didn't know about or envision in February that might happen between July and June of the following year. So how do we have that flexibility to make sure that we can get things on the agenda to get public input? Because I view that as our primary objective, is that staff is working on something, our community may or may not know about it, and this is really their opportunity to give us feedback and to allow us to gauge that feedback and give it to you before it goes up to City Council. So we can't always see those things a year in advance.
Depending on the cost, if there's a cost to it that needs to be reflected in your budget, then that takes a little advanced planning. If there is no cost, in other words, no inclusion into the city budget, we still have opportunity. There's the doors open up for our mid-year, or some budget updates, realignments. However, it's much more flexible for the commission. Your mission to advise council can be very fluid that way. The work plan items that staff works on are much less so, because they're required to, you know, staff projects typically cost money and resources, and, you know, we've got more than enough project work to do, so we have to prioritize, and that's really what council helps us to do with the work plan.
I also assume what won't change, that maybe you'll feel better about it. I mean, I'm assuming all we're really doing is changing the timing of this planning that we've done before.
Correct.
So in the past, almost at the end of every meeting, we went over our work plan. Literally, it was on our agenda that said, is this still going to happen? Can this still happen? Can we add something? I mean, when the all-inclusive playgrounds came on, that wasn't on our original one for that month because we didn't know about this grant. So I'm assuming we'll do the same thing we've always done, and on our agenda we'll review that plan. And the only exception is that, which I think is a great exception, by the way, is to move it up so it coincides with council making a plan, which every commission should be on the same calendar. But the other things about adding things and taking away things and your staff's ready or not ready, that won't change.
Correct.
Is that what
Okay,
your
I
question?
just wanted to confirm that
That won't
there
change.
still was some flexibility, or if there is flexibility, and how, you know, to make sure that as long as we're giving proper notice to the community, and I mean, the whole goal is here to get the community feedback.
Yes, absolutely.
That's what I want to make sure we can do.
Excellent. So I have some things, like I said, that I want to just put out there to see if there's any pull with the staff, or if they have any opinions on it, like, oh my God, that's a horrible idea, or yes, that's something we've thought of. Anybody else have anything that they want to add right now? Great. Okay, so from a smart city perspective, they talked about, Public Works talked about a municipal water system. I wanted to talk about gray water powering all of the parks in Cupertino, a citywide gray water system. For public engagement and transparency, finding ways to engage with new community members. That's not just, hey, here's a website you can go to, because quite frankly, it's still in the 90s. So it would be nice to find some way to engage them, especially as we build out our neighborhood events program, that they start coming to it and that becomes a normal part of their Cupertino experience, rather than, oh, hey, we happened upon this. So finding like a, you know, either Welcome to Cupertino or some kind of thing that really tries and drives home that community element. Where did the other one go? Community livability, we had like a ton in there. I had like two more. That one. Okay, well, I can't remember what one of them was. And the public-private partnerships. I want us to reopen conversations with Deep Cliff to see if they would be willing, because as unfortunately numbers for golf nationally are still plummeting, and it really doesn't seem like they're going to come up anytime soon, especially not in this neighborhood. And I know that foot golf was a effort to revitalize, but just from a budgeting perspective, I would love to see if that's that's possible. And then also partnering with Deanza's VPAC. And I know I've mentioned that before, only because I went there and I used to sit on student government there, and it was never completely used. And I'm sure with not $100 million, but I'm sure with a small, $5 or $8 million grant from the city for, a certain amount of time of usage of the space, we could get some time using that area. I also know that Flint is just completely falling apart. Yeah. So we have opportunities with Deanza and properties on Deanza that I think can solve some of the capital intensive projects, but still serve those same purposes and hopefully achieve those community goals. Cool. I know that the staff has been working on those in different ways, so I just wanted to, and the shuttle service, that was the last one. The shuttle service for the entire community and not just seniors. Cool, awesome. Well, seeing as that was our final agenda item, we also have staff and commission reports. We went to what did we do? Spelling bee, which was great. They're really smart. I definitely had to pay attention because they knew some words I didn't. And it would be great to see that publicized and maybe even making it a bigger event next year, not just having it in here, but either doing it, you know, on a mini stage in front of the library, or during a time of year where there are a lot of people that are active and around in the communities, to make it a bigger community event. I think it has so much potential, and Danny did an excellent job with it, and so did Colleen emceeing it. She was there.
I was there to do the spelling bee too. It was a fun event. The unfortunate part is that the spelling bee requires actual official spelling bee. You have to be a school to do it. So rather than city. So, but it was very interesting to see that number of 25 students registered to participate, and it was good, and they were smart. So yeah, it was a very well organized event. And then I attended the public input, the teen session. That was impressive. And you saw the 54 comment cards. It was quite impressive. And there were some of the things that came out of the discussions with the teens, which I'll formalize later.
Cool.
I attended the general adult feedback session yesterday. It was very disappointing. There were only 3 people who showed up that were from the public. And so it was at the senior center, but it wasn't just for seniors, it was for anybody who wasn't a teen. So I asked our director, you know, how did you get the teens there? And he said free food and you know, bubble tea, and maybe we need to spice it up a little bit to give our residents more incentive. And again, the communication is key. I mean, our adults they're busy too, but what can we do, even if it's prizes, you know, just small little things, I don't know, lottery, something, you know, things that are, like they give away at the big 5K bunny run, you know, the community businesses donate little things, and then there's a raffle. You know, what can we do to really engage our community? Because we try, and then it's just disappointing when people feel like they haven't been included, and so we need to somehow address that.
Judy, anything from you? 2 things, random ideas. One, what if we partnered with Whole Foods or Target to have an event either inside of or in front of their stores, because there's literally no place that Cupertino residents seem to enjoy going to more than those 2 specific locations. And then also, you know, everybody seems to come out for runs. Maybe doing a 5K My Cupertino, and part of doing the 5K My Cupertino run, just like we have the Big Bunny Run. We have a 5K My Cupertino, which is a dedicated, you know, just like we had that big fair, except now we actually have people running and physically engaged in a way to communicate with us. Cool. Anyways, anybody else? Nope. Going once, going twice. Excellent. This meeting is adjourned at 9:18.